Hey everybody, I'm a few weeks behind on my video devotionals here that I was putting out on our church Facebook page and now hopefully on YouTube as well. But I did want to fill one in. I'm hoping still to finish this little video devotional series on Joseph. I got today's video and one more after that. And so we picked Joseph up. If you've been watching these, we pick him up in prison in Genesis chapter 40. Now, it's been a few weeks since we last talked about why he's in prison, but in a quick summary, basically, Joseph is in prison because his former slave master's wife tried to take advantage of him, and when that didn't work, she accused him of trying to take advantage of her, and that ended up with Joseph landing in prison. And so, like we've seen at other times in Joseph's story, Joseph had a choice at this point. When he was in prison, he could throw his hands up in the air and start being bitter and start complaining about how everything is so unfair and how this really, he didn't deserve this, he didn't earn this, and he could really throw quite a big pity party here, which is something I think a lot of us would tend towards if we were in that situation, falsely accused again and ending up in an uncertain and a terrible situation. Again, this has been something we've seen numerous times throughout Joseph's life, but what we see him doing instead is the opposite of that. God continues to give Joseph favor even here in prison. It's the same thing that happened when he got to Potiphar's house. He was seen as a trustworthy person, and pretty soon he was given more and more responsibility and more trust. It's exactly what we see happen with him in prison again in Genesis chapter 40. He's given more and more responsibility until after a while, he's pretty much maybe not a prison guard. He's still a prisoner, but he's given, care over the prison. The prison guards didn't have to worry about how things were because Joseph had it under control. In his time in prison, a couple of the officials of the king, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, were both accused of something by Pharaoh and thrown into prison. And so their lives were turned upside down, and both of them had dreams while in prison. And one of the things we're going to see Joseph being able to do, one of the things that God gives him the ability to do, is to interpret dreams. And so these guys have these dreams, they're freaking out about them, and so they all of a sudden hear that Joseph is someone who has the ability to interpret these dreams, and they call for him, and Joseph tells these two men what their dreams mean. Now, he starts with the cupbearer, and the cupbearer's dream is interpreted favorably. Basically, the dream tells the cupbearer that the king is going to absolve him of all charges, and he's going to be given his place as the chief cupbearer once again. And so the chief baker hears this, and he says, hey, that's a pretty good interpretation. So he tells Joseph his dream. His interpretation is less good, and he ends up being put to death by the king. Not a great end for the baker. As the cupbearer is being restored, as he's leaving the prison, Joseph reaches out to him and says, hey, remember me when you get back to your position with the Pharaoh. Put in a good word for me. Let him know that I'm here falsely accused, and maybe, with your position and a little bit of clout that you have, maybe you can get me out of this situation. The chief cupbearer agrees to do that and then promptly forgets. And as we're going to see next time when we get to Genesis 41, we see the 2 years pass before the cupbearer finally remembers this promise that he made to Joseph back then. What we see here in Genesis 40 is Joseph choosing, seemingly, to make the most out of a bad situation. We see God blessing him in an incredible way, again, with him rising to prominence within the prison and given all this responsibility, and we see God blessing the things that Joseph does. Now, he doesn't get out of prison at this point, and as we're going to see in our next video, we can see God's reasoning for that, and we can see God's sovereignty in the moment. But as far as take-home points from this part, I think the challenge is just when things start to happen and things start to pile up in your life and things don't maybe seem overly fair, we always have a choice in this. And this is going to be a very maybe simple application, but an important one. We have a choice. Are we going to sit and are we going to mope, and are we going to complain about, oh, this is unfair, all this different sort of stuff? Or are we going to recognize the opportunities that God may bring our way here and seek to serve and to honor him in the midst of all this? This is what we see Joseph doing. We see Joseph being blessed. We see one man's life restored through the work of Joseph in that way, and we're going to see that this is a stepping stone that God uses to be able to fully bring Joseph out, and we're going to see next time the extent that God basically raises Joseph up in the midst of all this. And so if you're going through something that just doesn't seem overly fair right now, and there's circumstances sort of conspiring against you, and you feel like you can relate to Joseph's story, I hope you can also follow Joseph's example in this and continue to look for those ways that you can be used by God, that you can bring glory and honor to him in the midst of it. And you never know how God is going to be using these circumstances for your good. It feels like that's an application we could bring out every week in Joseph's story. But it is no less true this week. And so I hope you have a good day. I hope you're enjoying the rain. It's still kind of raining off and on here. And if you're planning to join us for church this Sunday, June 21st, man, I'm excited to see you there. It's going to be a good day. As for now, have a great day, and we'll see you again.